Hello, I'm Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner, and I have the privilege of serving as the Children Advocacy Alliance's Executive Director. Our mission is to bring our time, talent, and resources to improving conditions for Nevada's children in the areas of education, safety, economic well-being, and health. We are committed to being the independent voice for Nevada's children and families. With each podcast, we will look at ways our community can work together to answer a critical call to action, to provide our children with all the resources they need to make a strong start in life. Today, we'll be exploring the data behind policy decisions with CAA Director of Kids Council Initiatives, Dr. Tara Rains, Dr. Kenneth Retzel, Director of Education Policy at the Gwynn Center, and Felicia Ortiz, President of the Nevada State Board of Education.
Retzel. My name is Tara Rains. Welcome to the Children's Advocacy Alliance podcast. I'm here today joined by Dr. Kenny Retzel of the Gwynn Center and Felicia Ortiz, who is the president of the Nevada State Board of Education. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you both. We're here today to talk a little bit about data and education data in particular here in Nevada. So if you all just wouldn't mind sharing, Dr. Retzel, Kenny, we'll start with you. What is the state of education data in Nevada? What work have you been doing in that area?
Yeah, and thank you for having me, Tara. Lisa, always good to see you. So we at the Gwynn Center are looking at all sorts of data related to education. So some pre-K data, but then mostly K-12, and then we're even doing some in the higher ed space. And I think the state of data, if I can say, in Nevada is actually really good. That Nevada education data is very easily accessible, and which makes for a wonderful researcher's opportunity. But as I think we'll talk about a little bit later today, it also provides a lot of noise in the system where individuals can latch onto a certain data point and say, but always think about this, or but what about this? So even if something good is happening over here, we can always say, but what about this? And so it makes the conversation more complicated, but I think that's a good thing too. I would rather have more data and more data access than less.
Yeah. I'd have to agree. I'm a total data junkie. Data is what I do in my day job. And so I think that data creates transparency, and that is going to help us breed more trust in the system. And so I'm all about lots of transparency. And I want to make sure that, and it's one of the things we've been working on from the state perspective, that the general public has an opportunity and a mechanism to test us and hold us accountable. But to Kenny's point, right, data has to be shared strategically, and people have to understand what they're looking at and how it fits into the big picture too in order to really make judgments.
And that makes perfect sense. And I want to spend a little time later in our conversation talking about what public access to that data looks like. But first, I want to talk a little bit, Kenny, about the multi-phase project that's going on at the Gwynn Center around Nevada education data and around how that data can be used to paint a robust picture of what's happening in the state. You could tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So the report that we're working on right now is looking at education rankings and the data that underlies those education rankings. And the impetus for it was a group of individuals came and said, we want to see if categorical funding, investments in education, that categorical funding was just those mechanisms to support specific student populations. And so we have a number of categorical programs that might be targeting in a good way, students that are English learners, or students that receive free and reduced price lunch, or early literacy programs to target early learners in early grade levels. And
so for clarification, so there are folks who want to know if we give additional funds to specific student groups, will that help move the needle for those student groups, right?
Actually, let me give you a little bit more background.
Okay.
So in 2017, when Governor Sandoval was the governor, there was a major set of bills passed that put a lot more money into education.
Okay.
Because it was, and I believe this is my opinion, a Republican-led legislature at the time, there was a lot of accountability attached to that money.
Okay.
And so each of those pots of money was dedicated to a specific thing. So if that was supporting our, I like to call them emerging bilinguals and not English language learners.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Or if it was supporting our under-resourced students versus free and reduced lunch, there was specific criteria for those funds. They must be used on research-proven programming. They must have a report every year, that kind of thing.
Right.
So we're, 5 years of those funds going to those specific purposes. And so they wanted to say what was the return on investment, essentially.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yep. But so interestingly, there have been 2 evaluations. One that Nevada Department of Education has completed, and that was a outside independent evaluation of these programs, and it suggested that they worked. And then the Gwynn Center did our own, much smaller, but a similar evaluation and showed that it worked. But the ask was specifically, can we see that investment in dollars coming through on education rankings?
Okay.
And the very short answer and kind of the disappointing answer for everyone is no. But in all things education, the answer is a lot more nuanced than just a no. And there's a lot of reasons as to why we might not see that. And so the report isn't taking a look. It's not a good, the bad, and the ugly about education rankings. It's truly trying to answer that question of, did this money that came into Nevada education, are we seeing it the outcomes show up in the actual national education rankings themselves?
So why aren't we seeing it in the education rankings?
So it's
very nuanced.
Yes.
very nuanced.
Just a high level overview of what are some of the things. Is it simply a matter of the fact that the rankings aren't looking at the places where we're putting our investments? Is it, just kind of a high level overview of.
Yeah, so what our report finds, and again, it's still in process, but it suggests, I think one underlying it is that each of these programs are putting money towards specific groups of students. So it's not targeting the entire population of Nevada, right? Okay, so that's one. But then the other one, so we might talk about it in a little bit, but the rankings themselves are a little bit dated, if I can say that word, right? So the most recent Annie Casey data is using achievement data from 2019, and that's the most recent ones. And so the ones that we're using is a one before that. So anyway, the pandemic has happened too. So we don't actually know where students are at this exact moment. We know where they were in 2019. And then another interesting tidbit, which is very obvious, but it's got huge ramifications, is that these rankings are relative, right? They're not absolute measures. So again, if we just, I don't mean to pick on Annie Casey rankings, but if you look at those, and Nevada is actually increasing or getting better
across the
year over
board,
year.
yeah.
And I don't think anyone at this table or in the state in education is going to say we're happy with where we're at. But I would rather be moving in the good direction than in the opposite direction. But rankings are relative by nature. And so Nevada improving, but if other states are improving quicker, Nevada needs to keep going, but can we celebrate what's going well and figure out what it is that's going well so that we can invest more money, more time, more resources into that?
And that's one of the key things, right? Is if we understand cause, like what is causing us to increase this way, then we can invest more in that, right?
Yeah.
Like we said, there's good data, but there's not quite enough of it in some cases. We want to be able to measure across all students, not just certain particular groups. And that's mostly what the ratings are based on, which is NAEP. NAEP is the national test that's given to again, not all students, a selection of students across the nation, and that is based on a random choice, right? And so those students test every other year. Those test scores are what we're using to get a lot of this data for the national rankings. And so again, it's not complete, and it's not just a picture of Nevada, it's a picture of Nevada compared to all the other states.
So when the NAEP testing happens, are they just testing the kids in the cities, or are they testing kids in the rurals as well? Is it statewide, or is it just Southern Nevada?
It's statewide, but it's not every kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the neat thing about the NAEP, at least as it relates to Nevada, is that while it is given to a subsample or a sample of all students across the state, CCSD, or the Clark County School District, is what's called a TUDA, a Trial Urban district assessment, I think they
I don't even know that one.
Yeah.
so it's a group of several large urban districts that they sample within the sample. And so you get a representative sample of how CCSD, the Clark County School District, is doing. And so then you can compare how CCSD is doing to LA Unified, to Chicago, to Denver. And so that you get both a statewide comparison as well as a large urban district comparison.
Okay.
I have to say though, I'm a rural kid. I grew up in a small. I literally went to an elementary school that had 2 grades per class. So I'm always focused on the rural kids too, right? I want to make sure that we're not losing sight of their needs and requirements, and that they're also achieving. So yeah, I like the statewide data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is why I wanted to make it clear that when we're talking about the state of education in Nevada, we're talking about statewide education pictures and data, and not just the large, Clark and Washoe, because I think sometimes the conversation becomes Clark and Washoe, and there's a lot of folks out there that are beyond those 2 districts. For sure.
Yeah.
But one more, if I can just add, one
go.
more kind of wrinkle in all of this is that we're talking about education rankings like there's only one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you've got Annie E. Casey is one that a lot of people point to. You've also got Quality Counts, which is put out by Education Week. And so they use different data points.
Right.
They come to different conclusions then, obviously, right? If you've got different inputs, you're going to have different outputs. You've also got a more recent one from the Fordham Institute. NerdWallet, the website NerdWallet came out with one fairly recently. And so people, it becomes very difficult to talk about education data in this perspective, because again, going back to all the data points that are out floating around, well, what about NerdWallet says this, but Quality Count says this, and then throw in, well, SBAC, which is our state assessment that we give to 3rd to 8th grade students, all 3rd to 8th grade students, is just one more thing that generally isn't included in the ranking. So it muddies the waters a lot, but it is all very good data, but it results in very nuanced conversations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So to kind of recap and go back, one of the challenges with the rankings is that we can improve. And if Kentucky's also improving, our ranking may not move. And I just picked Kentucky randomly. There's no relationship with
And can I give you an
Kentucky.
example of
Yes,
that?
yes.
So on Quality Counts, the education weeks, there is a couple of metrics about the number of students who take advanced placement coursework. And it's actually one of the things that Nevada has been trying to improve upon.
It has been.
And has been improving upon. So the metric is, it's complicated, but it's the percentage of high school students who are taking and passing an AP test. Nevada, please.
Can I mention how important that is, though? First
Yes,
of all?
please.
So if a student takes and passes an AP test, that means they got a 4 or 5. It's a scale of 1 to 5. That means they also get college credit. So it's a step
Saves money. Yeah.
for their parents and them.
Yeah.
Right. But it also shows that they're college ready. So that's another piece of data that we look at as a state a lot.
Yep, it exposes them to the rigors of college, more college-like curriculum.
Yeah.
So in this metric, Nevada has actually improved 10 percentage points. We should all be
fantastic.
celebrating.
Yeah.
However, if you look at the rankings themselves, Nevada is on just that metric, Nevada has fallen 4 spots.
Ugh.
So if you look at just the rankings, again, because it's a relative measure, if you look at the absolute measure, let's celebrate. And if you look at that relative measure of comparing Nevada to Kentucky, we have fallen 4 spots in the national rankings.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about how the data is relative. And so here we have increased advanced placement pass rates by 10% across the state. Huge jump. Going to save families thousands of dollars. Going to demonstrate that kids are ready for college and the rigor of a university curriculum. And we fell in the rankings?
Yes. And so, and I would love to be able to go out on a roadshow and tell people this. However,
This is your roadshow, Kenny. Here we are.
Well, but that becomes a very nuanced.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it becomes very much in the weeds, and people just want to say, but Nevada is good or bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like
We're
that's the
humans still.
extent.
We're still people.
Yes, exactly. And so, while we love the ability to be able to have these conversations, it's so hard to get it out and to have people acknowledge that, yeah, there are good things.
Also to make it consumable by everyone, right?
Yeah.
So as the State Board of Ed president, I'm really interested in AP.
Because that's a huge
But
indicator. It's
as
fantastic.
the parent of Jose Sanchez, that might not be my biggest interest. I want to make
That's fair.
sure my kid is going to a school that's going to deliver on his goals and dreams, right?
Yeah.
And so our goal as a state is to make every kid society ready, right?
That's fair, yeah.
Not just college career, but society ready. And a lot of these rankings don't necessarily show all the other stuff that we're doing to help prepare them or lift them up from where they're at.
So the rankings are only painting a part of the picture. Where can we get more of the picture? How can we get more of the picture? Help.
So for any parent who is out there, the Nevada Department of Education has a wonderful website that has got all the data that you could ever possibly imagine that you would want. It's got attendance data, it's got discipline data, and it breaks it down by student population, so you can start looking at educational equity issues, right? And it also has those assessment test scores if you're so interested in those as well, and ACT test scores. So it's a wonderful website.
Yeah, and if you're a data junkie, you can download it and like slice and dice it. Yeah. It's pretty cool. What I would love to have and what we're working towards, three things. So the Department of Ed, as well as all the local school districts, got a big chunk of money from ESSER. The ESSER was the COVID money. Let's just call it that, right?
Okay.
Pandemic relief money. Part of what the Department of Ed is using that money for is making sure that all of our information is available in multiple languages, so Spanish, English, and Tagalog. Building out more data systems. So there's things that we wish we knew, but we don't capture the data, right? So like a good example is how are 8th graders doing in science, right? That's a big data point for us. We weren't capturing it well, so that's something we're adding. And then we're also building out the analysts, the data junkies, right?
Yes.
So we need some more data junkies actually working on that and putting it into a presentable format.
Yes.
So I'm a big fan of infographics, right? I want a one-pager that says all the things I need to know with some pretty pictures.
Absolutely.
That is the more consumable way to take data in for the majority of our general public. One of the things that brings us down in ranking, believe it or not, is the adult achievement of education in the community. So only 30% of the adults in the state of Nevada have a higher ed degree.
Okay.
That drops us down.
Okay.
So that is one of those data points that drops us down in the rankings.
That has nothing to do with the school district and the education systems, but it's more about our community as a whole.
It doesn't, right? Like, so if more of our students went on to higher ed and got higher ed degrees, then eventually that would rise up, but it would take time, right? Because they have to actually go through the whole K-12 system, higher ed, et cetera.
That's right.
But everyone moving in also impacts that, right? So if you move into Nevada and you don't have a higher ed degree, then you're also dropping us down in the rankings. But nationally, it's proven for all of us data junkies that the best way to deliver information to the general public is at a 5th grade level. We in the education system are horrible at that.
Terrible.
Yes.
Yes.
We write everything in college English.
Yes. So
It's a
fancy.
dissertation.
It's really dense. It's not easy to read.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a perfect example. Our state improvement plan is like 80 pages.
Yeah, I'm not reading that. And I am interested, and I'm not reading it.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? We're working towards how do we present that data out to others. Let's be real. Most education folks did not go get a degree in marketing and sales.
That's
and
also
so
true.
that's a big piece of PR, marketing and sales, right? We also can't afford to pay for high-priced PR and marketing firms. We're operating on a really tight budget. Contrary to popular belief, the Department of Ed only has like 140 employees. And
so if someone's listening to this and owns a major marketing or PR firm and wants to give their services to
I have the whole campaign right here.
Excellent.
I'm ready to go.
Excellent.
Yep.
So donate your services.
Yep. Let's do it.
Yes.
I'm all for it. So can I jump into
Yeah, please.
The Board of Ed over the last year and a half has spent a ton of time putting together some very aggressive goals for the state of Nevada.
Okay.
Because we have full confidence that our educators and our students are capable. Our students are no different than the students in Massachusetts. Our parents don't care any less than the parents in Massachusetts. And our educators are not any less qualified than the parents, teachers in Massachusetts. So why couldn't we achieve that? So one of the goals that we came up with, partly to combat the negative press about we're always 48th, 49th, or whatever in these national rankings, is that we focused in on education counts as the ranking we were going to use.
Okay.
And then we said, okay, what are the things we can control and what is it measuring? There's one section of that ranking that is measuring K-12 student achievement.
Okay.
We have been, at least old data, right? 18, 19, 20. We have been steadily increasing. We were 40-something, 41st, then 37th. And we stayed 37th, I think. We're 45th, 41st, 37th, right? So and then 2020 came out, which was using the 2019 data. We were 18th.
Okay.
So we moved up in just K-12 student achievement and wanted to highlight that because guess what? Our teachers needed to know they were doing a good job. Our students needed to know they were capable and able to achieve. And the general public needed to know that the investments that we'd made in education were working. Yes, it's not an absolute data point. There's flaws in it, but we wanted to also give our community a North Star that was aggressive and achievable. So we said, we're gonna move that ranking up to the top 10 in the next 5 years.
I like it.
So that's our goal.
I think that's a fantastic goal. Where can the public find all of the goals at the State Board of Ed? Is it on the State Board of Ed website?
Yep.
Okay, so if you head to the State Board of Ed website, you can find all of the goals, the ambitious, achievable, attainable goals that have been set for Nevada's kids and teachers in their education system.
Yep, because we believe they're capable.
They are. They absolutely are. Absolutely are. Okay, so we know that the rankings are only telling part of the story. As we're moving through this conversation, what story do you think is the important story for folks in Nevada to have? Like, what story should we be telling? You know, like if I'm on the Las Vegas Reddit thread and someone says, I'm moving to Vegas, talk to me about education. What is our education story?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of good stuff happening.
Right.
So first of all, on a very global level, we've improved dramatically over the last 10, 20 years. Where we were at like lower 80s or 60s, gosh, graduation rate way back in the 1980s. I'm getting those dates confused. We're up into 82, 83% graduation rate.
So kids are graduating from high school.
Yes.
Good news.
COVID is definitely having an impact on that, but everybody knows the value of that diploma.
Yeah.
That is a currency that everyone can agree on, right? Our kids are taking much more rigorous curriculum. Our bar in the state of Nevada is high.
Nice.
And we're not going to deny that ever. We want our kids to set the bar high so that they can achieve. And they do.
Yeah.
We have the top magnet CTE school in the nation.
What's CTE?
Career and tech education.
Fantastic.
So for those of you that grew up in the 80s, 90s like me, that was like a VOTEC school, right? So now we have some phenomenal programs. Our career and tech schools graduate kids at like a 98% rate.
That's fantastic. And they're coming out with skills and with trades so that they can...
With college credits.
All of the things.
Yes, exactly.
Ready to make money, ready to save money by having those college credits behind them. Our career and technical education programs are doing fantastic in the state, is what you're saying.
You can graduate from Rancho High School with a pilot's license.
Oh, snap. I didn't know that.
You can graduate from East Tech as a sous chef.
What?
Yeah. I mean, we can graduate from Western as an HVAC tech.
And we need those desperately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have some phenomenal programs. And we just opened a new career and tech school here down south, up in the Northwest, northeast part of the town. The problem is scaling, right? Mm-hmm. And so that becomes one of our biggest issues. So we have several challenges, but the underlying factor in the majority of those challenges is our funding.
Okay.
And so that was another big impetus for us, kind of trying to get everyone to understand the data and understand the connection between investment and outcomes.
Okay.
So back to Kenny's original point, right? How can we show to the general public if they make investments in education that's going to, the outcome of that is not only going to impact those one point in time ratings, right? But it's going to impact our overall economy for the state. Totally. I'm a business owner, right? So I want highly qualified employees for my company.
Absolutely.
Companies that consider moving to Nevada are looking at that education ranking as one of the deciding factors of coming here.
Yeah.
So there was an economic kind of motivator to moving that up as well.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And I think I wouldn't disagree with anything that you just said, but that becomes the challenge that we face in the education world. And I think that's where I'm not trying to bring it back to the report by any means, but I think that's the problem that Nevada faces as an academic. It's fascinating, but as a practitioner, it's so frustrating, is you're always competing against narratives.
Right.
And so Felicia can just say all of that great stuff, but then somebody will just say, but Nevada's last in education, according to the
We are
rankings.
not last
Yeah,
on any of them.
right.
For clarification. Keep going, sorry.
Yes, and so, but then that just stops the conversation right there.
Yeah.
But then, what are you looking at? What are the data points that underlie it? But again, there's all this excellence that's happening, but it gets overshadowed. And I've shared this, and sorry, Felicia, if you've heard this anecdote before. So I grew up in Iowa, and at the time that I grew up in Iowa, it was one of, if not the best state in education. And I was in elementary school, and I knew that. But I don't know what that meant, obviously, right? But I just knew it was something to be proud of.
You were the best, yeah.
And now fast forward, I move out to Nevada and I teach some classes at UNLV, and it's public policy classes. And inevitably, these are kids that are about ready to graduate from UNLV with a 4-year degree, juniors and seniors, and inevitably one student at least once a semester would raise their hand and be like, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. I'm a product of the Nevada education system. And it was a very good question, but it permeates everything about the education space, that the students are aware of it. Teachers, like you said earlier, are aware of it. Parents are aware of it. National business, or businesses are aware of it as well. And so it's combating that narrative to say, okay, this is what the rankings are, but look at all these great things that are happening that are more on the ground of what the students are actually experiencing.
Yeah.
So in reality, we need to do some identity shifting here in Nevada, like our identity as being such a I don't know, like having such a poor education system is kind of woven into the culture and our identity. And so how do we shift that? How do we move and change that? And I think, and I'm...
If I had the easy button to do that, that would be the first thing I did right now. Today.
Yeah. It's the conversations. It's the parent group threads. It's the, right? It's the media. It's everything.
I think my vice president of the board, Mark Newbern, said it best. He said the ranking isn't a measure of how our students are performing. It's a measure of the value that we as a community put into education.
Ooh, right? Because you put your money where your values are.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Exactly. And the one thing that we consistently get an F on
is funding.
Funding.
Yeah. And not because F is for funding, but because we are getting an F in funding.
Yeah.
We're failing at funding. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the other reasons that we chose this as one of our goals was to change that narrative. Right?
I like it.
And to hopefully impact the attitudes and morale of not just the students, but more importantly, their educators and their families.
Yeah, no.
Because we all have a vested interest in seeing Nevada succeed, right? We live here for a reason.
Yeah.
And so we need to all be part of changing that narrative and changing the mindset, I think, in order to make this really move in the right direction.
Absolutely. I'm going back to what you were saying about being from Iowa and Iowa being number one. And it's sticking with me because what do our kids believe about themselves if the narrative is that, right? Like, what are we telling them passively about their value and who they are by really kind of clinging to this, we're one of the worst states in education belief collectively, I think so thank you for sharing that, because that's, I don't know, it's powerful.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. To consider it, to think, I mean, whatever. I did not go to the top schools in the nation, so I don't have that identity. But so I never would have conceptualized the fact that the kids are hearing this, they're hearing the stories, they're hearing the conversations, and they're really metabolizing it as part of who they are. And I think that is a huge takeaway as to why we really need to look at the bright spots. Not ignore by any chance, the parts that need growth or need support and development, but definitely not.
And here's the thing: I think if you talk to any student, the majority of them are going to say that's not the experience I have, because they have educators that care about them.
Right.
that are making sure that that's not the experience that they're having in their day-to-day education life, right? But there are pockets, and I don't want to ever forget that there's a lot of work we still need to do.
Right.
I'm never going to be happy until probably never, right? Like I want us to continue to excel and grow and constantly. And so the other big thing that the data shows us is where we're not doing well,
Right.
and where we need to add supports or add additional. One of the biggest things, and I'll say this in every single meeting I have or every opportunity I have, the number one thing that would move us up in the rankings is full day pre-K.
Oh, snap. I would, as the parent of toddlers, I would love full day pre-K.
Well, think about it, right? It's not just a good thing for the students, right? Because it sets a proper foundation, but it helps families from an economic perspective as well.
So much money.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to get misconstrued. I want Nevada education to be the best it possibly can be, right?
Yes.
But if we are truly, if the narrative is the rankings, to Felicia's point, we're last or one of the worst in funding. And if we had pre-K, it would move us up in NEKC. It would move us up in quality counts. And so full day pre-K is going to cost money. I want to focus on literacy and math skills and those sorts of things. So I'm not saying ignore those, but if we just need to overcome that narrative, we would fund education and we would put that money into pre-K.
Yeah,
right?
the ripple of that. Universal pre-K would be tremendous. I mean, and also for our local economy, right? Think of the parents who could dependably return to work and also have additional
disposable income.
Oh, man.
Yes.
So much gas I would buy if I wasn't paying for daycare. It'd be amazing. Childcare, not daycare, childcare.
Yeah. And to your point about the high quality, that then, as those students progress into upper grades, studies have suggested that if you go to pre-K, that sticks with you.
Absolutely.
You still need continued high quality education to keep those gains, but you'll see third grade literacy go up, you'll see third grade math scores, and then you will continue to see that flow through the system.
Well, that foundation is set, right? You get that really, really strong, solid foundation for the kids with universal pre-K.
Well, it sets the foundation for everything, right? Yeah. Like universal pre-K allows time.
Universal full day pre-K.
Full day pre-K.
Universal full day pre-K is what we're talking about, to be clear. Yes.
For all kids,
for all children across the state.
Amen.
In the world, in the city. Universal full day pre-K. Okay.
Because pre-K really sets the foundation for like the behavioral skills, the social skills, all of the foundational learning skills, right? And then they start to learn to read, and then third grade comes and they're reading to learn, right? And so all of that, I'm in the construction industry as like my day job, right? So I think of it as building a house, right? You can't build a house on a
solid foundation.
Yes.
Not
solid foundation.
Yes. Shaky. That's the word.
Exactly. So here's the thing I want to add to that. Is that we also want, and you mentioned this at the beginning, to make sure that we're gathering data beyond K-12 because that feeds back to us and helps us to get better. So I'm about continuous improvement, right? So if we don't get data from our higher ed institutions and learn what our students weren't prepared for there, then we can't improve that on the K-12 side. But we also are, as a state Department of Ed, looking at education as a continuum from birth to death. Right? It shouldn't just be from K through 12 or pre-K through 12. It should be from birth to death, right? You start learning the second you come out the womb, right? And you don't stop learning until you die. So we want people to be able to come on and off that road of education throughout their entire lifetime. We have some amazing schools within our community and state that have really high percentages of adult learners. So let's not forget about them either.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now that data is not there. Well, we have a tiny little bit of it.
We're going to get it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
We're going to get it all.
We're putting the systems in place to get it there.
Which is fantastic. All right. So anything else that you...
Well, so I think, if I can just add that I think the great thing that the state is doing with their improvement plan, if I may, and if any of these reports seem like the Gwynn Center is coming after not using rankings and that is not it at all. But I think what Nevada needs, and what, from my perspective of looking at data for so long, is I think it's great that we are actually saying what we're going to do and how we're going to move forward to it, because I think that's what's been missing in a lot of these conversations is that through no fault of anyone, but it's again chasing a narrative, is that when state test scores come out, we have to talk about that and we have to chase that, which we should, right? I mean, we should be cognizant of that. But then when rankings come out, we chase those, but it's a different data set. When graduation rates come out, we chase that. And so Nevada hasn't ever really had a conception of what the important data is, if I can say it that way, right?
No,
and
that's
that
fair.
to go back to those evaluations that went on about the categorical funding that we were talking about earlier, we don't even know what outcomes of interest were for those sorts of programs. And so the evaluations that were done, one by the independent evaluators and then with the Gwynn Center, we used different outcome measures but nobody could ever say, like, are you trying to, by targeting emerging English learners, is that
emerging bilinguals?
Emerging
So
bilinguals.
The language of origin has value, and so they're becoming bilingual and adding an additional language.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But so for those, in the original evaluation, I'm not trying to badmouth it, but they used math proficiency scores. They used ELA and math proficiency scores, which is fine. It's a decision that you make. We used the WIDA test, which tests
the
language proficiency.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but we don't know what we're trying to move. And so if we're trying to move rankings, then let's focus on those metrics and really get those, socialize those out into the community so people know what they should be looking for versus, anything else.
And I will say, like, I hate to focus just on rankings.
No.
Because a kid is not a test score.
This is true. Yeah.
But we need something that the general public can get behind and support, right? So I think if you asked anyone in the community, there's my goal within the next 2 years of my term, to be able to ask anyone in the community, what is our goal as a state? And they say top 10 in the nation. I think everyone can get behind that, right? So that was another impetus for the goal that we
top
chose.
10 on this ranking based on this metrics. Like, we also want people to know where to look, right? Because if we're shooting for top 10 in the nation and they're looking in the wrong place, they're going to say, how on earth are we going to get to top 10 from here? So we want to make sure that
we're very specific.
Yes.
And to Kenny's point, right, setting SMART goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is
by SMART goal, you mean specific,
measurable, attainable, time bound, and
this are
Relevant.
repeat it.
Relevance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
See, this is why we're a good team.
It's a team. Good job.
This is a message to our legislators, right? When you pass legislation, don't just throw money at it.
Yes.
Make sure that you're doing it in a very strategic way and that there's accountability measures and you know that it's actually helping.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of, and I see it all the time because we're the ones that have to deal with policy and regulations. There's a lot of legislation passed. Change this. Okay, well, what is that going to actually do for our kids? Right? Add this other test. Add this other, class. What is that going to do for the outcomes of children? And how is that going to help them to succeed in society?
And how are we going to measure that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how often?
Yeah.
And why?
And who?
Yes, exactly.
And who?
Who's the big part? Because guess who it usually falls on?
You.
Our teachers.
Oh, snap. Yeah. I was like,
why do you think they're so burned out?
No, that's fair. Teachers.
Yes.
Man, y'all are working hard.
And we constantly add one more thing. Oh, you now have to make sure all of our students are socially, emotionally developed. Oh, now you have to make sure that they have food. Oh, now you have to make sure that they can see the counselor. Oh, like they're wearing way too many hats.
They really are.
And so a key point in all of this, right? We can't just say, oh, we're going to throw more money at it. Everything's going to work. You have to think through the entire implementation and measure, correct if necessary, and start over if absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that, I feel confident that you all have the right ears so that you can bend those ears and we can really be intentional with this coming legislation. This coming legislative session will be fruitful in a way that, will really help us move toward getting in that top 10. For sure.
And because why shouldn't we be?
No, I mean, I love that. I love that idea.
There's a board member, and I want to be sympathetic because you even mentioned it earlier that we want students to be society ready.
Yeah.
And when you talk about education data, there is what does even career ready mean?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we kind of have an idea what college ready is. It's still nebulous.
22 on an ACT and get
Yeah.
into college,
Yeah, right, like,
Like,
yeah.
that's-
Right, but that we know that doesn't always predict whether completion or even completion of the first year, because there are all of these social and extra pressures.
Environmental.
Exactly,
Yeah.
these other things.
And so I want to be sympathetic to that too, because I think that is an interesting opportunity for Nevada, is to define what that means. Because part of me, like the quantitative part of me, says, well, you need to measure it somehow,
Yeah.
right? To be able to, because you can't just be like, well, our
I'm
students
right here with
are
you, right?
society,
Yeah.
right? But I think that is an important goal, that our students need to graduate and be well-adjusted citizens.
Yeah.
But what does that even look like?
Let me
And
tell
I think we might know what it looks like, but we don't know how to.
We don't have a metric for
Right.
that. Yeah.
And every time I talk to high school students, guess what's the one thing they ask for? Every time.
Hot Cheetos.
No, that's good. That's good. They want a life skills class.
Oh, for
they
sure.
want adulting 101, right? So how do you measure that they're ready to be an adult?
Yeah.
That's the challenge that we have as data junkies, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we measure that we're being successful? But yeah, I want a kid to be able to manage their credit and buy a house
That's
and,
amazing.
cook a dinner for their family and know how to do laundry, right? Like all those things that we take for granted that we may have learned growing up.
Or that families are offering explicit instruction on, right? Like they're kind of these adaptive skills, these life skills that we assume all families have, right? And that the families are also teaching their kids. And you're right. I don't know that we can make those
bad
assumptions.
assumption.
Yeah.
It is a
make that
completely bad assumption.
Yeah.
We've learned that over and over again. So
mean,
I need to stop. I'm going to say me personally, I'm going to own that. Stop making that assumption,
Yeah.
right? Not everybody grew up with a mama as a teacher. My mom is an educator, so I got
Right.
the extra benefit. Not every kid has that
Right.
privilege, yeah.
Totally. So as we close this out, I'm going to give you a few seconds to think. A 3-sentence summary, right? 3-sentence summary of education data in Nevada. What should people know? Like, what do they need to take away from this podcast that they have listened to on their way to work or while on the treadmill or doing whatever they do in their lives, right? 3 sentences, education, the state of education data in Nevada. What do people need to know?
My first sentence is education data is more complicated than a tweet. So
Tremendous.
it's very nuanced, and while I'm not faulting anyone for wanting to consume content through Twitter or tweets or Facebook, the underlying truth is likely more complicated than can be conveyed in that single tweet.
Okay, I love it.
Mine would be that our students and educators should not be defined by a score. That's a point in time relevant.
Yeah.
And that our education system is improving. Still has a long ways to go, but we're completely capable of doing better.
I love this. Thank you so much. I appreciate you both. Wonderful. You're doing hard work. I'm grateful that we have smart people in the state to do the heavy lifting and to really help move the needle. I'm grateful for both of you giving your time today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. This is Tara Rains with the Children's Advocacy Alliance signing off of our podcast.